do have a closing with Echo Title coming up soon.
When?
It is, well, it's a short sale, and they're doing negotiations.
Vienna?
What was that?
With Todd Conrad?
Yep,
Yeah.
in Leesburg?
He's in Vienna, but he,
Oh, okay,
you can
yeah,
close
yeah.
pretty much
Okay, yeah.
wherever. So I used to work with your dad a lot when I was at RGS.
RGS, yeah.
Okay, so I was asked to come in and just explain to you our role as a title company, and with regards to the settlement. I do have a mock settlement scheduled in my office on the 10th at 10 a.m. And what's different about what I'm going to go over today and what we would do in a mock closing is actually go through all the lender documents, explain what documents are what and what you can expect in the closing, kind of give you some sample questions of what sometimes happens when people walk in the door. Normal questions that may freak you out at first are probably pretty normal to us. There's a lot of things that we haven't dealt with in the 19 years. We used to have a lot of walkthrough issues. We don't have as many now, so we know how to navigate or help you navigate through the closing and the walkthrough items. Okay, so in your folder, I do have a PowerPoint presentation that we'll go through, and I thought we have this, what's called a 3-day closing disclosure for TRID. So you know that your buyers have to have their closing disclosure 3 days prior to closing. Okay, so this kind of gives you an idea of the closing dates on Monday, then the closing disclosures will be due the preceding Thursdays, and so on. So it's a good little cheat sheet for you to be, bugging your loan officer, say Wednesday, preceding the day before that Thursday, to ask, how are you going to be able to deliver the closing disclosure?
I have a question. So, I just did one, and my clients got the closing, settlement was this morning.
Yep.
My clients got closing disclosure last night, they were the purchasers. So, that's not good, right?
No, it's not. So there's two things that happen now. Closing disclosure is for the lender. You have to get it 3 days prior to closing. Does not have to be the final closing disclosure. So what we would ask, and I do ask at the settlement table, I would say, okay, this is your closing disclosure because we have to go over it. I go over the front page. I said, you've received this 3 or more days ago, correct? And they say yes. If they say no, it is my duty to stop closing because
Oh, really?
you can't waive that right. So my assumption with that situation is they may have got something 3 days prior, but the final was given to them the night before.
Last night, okay.
Because, so that's a little loophole.
Did 3 days count the weekend days?
Saturdays.
Okay.
Yeah, Saturdays. Most banks do business on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Holidays, Sundays, no.
So they don't have to get the final 3-day, but
No.
what
So-
do they have to get then?
Well, originally it was supposed to be the final. But what we're finding is there's tweaks. Like, you go through a walkthrough, and you want to increase a closing cost credit, or or the transfer taxes are off, or just little tweaks that happen through normal closing that we would think was going to stop closing, don't. So what they need to do is they have to be, this is what they give them, but at the end of the day, most times on the day of closing where I thought was going to be completely cool, we're going to be done in 3 days, we have changed up to the hour before closing. Because it is our job, we have a settlement statement. Our settlement statement looks like this. Other title companies' settlement statements have an alto form that's a lot harder to read. What Echo Title did was they took an old HUD one, removed all the HUD language, and made it their settlement statement. Because we are only responsible for having a disbursement statement. So we provide this to them along with the title, when they give us the title commitment, okay? We give them the title commitment, when we get the title order, and then what they do, hopefully 4 days before closing, they give us closing instructions. And then what we do is we build our settlement statement to the closing instructions, and then we send it out to them. And then what they do is they send us the closing disclosure, and we have to match it up. Both our settlement statement and the closing disclosure has to match. The bottom lines have to match. And when they don't, we have to find out why it doesn't. But then we're under a ticking time bomb, right? So even if they don't match, the lender is sending the disclosure 3 days so that they can close. Which is why you're having some tweaks at the table.
So if that happened, then who's liable, and is there a penalty penalty of some sort for following through?
There's no
or-
penalty because they're following through with the law, which says 3 days prior to closing.
No, but I mean, if they didn't get it, then,
Then you have to, it has to be pushed out. And a lot of lenders, because there is a penalty, $1,000 per one, I think, every time there's an instance, if you get caught, they're more likely to say,
Okay.
we're not gonna be able to do the closing disclosure, we have to push it out.
Oh,
So
that's really interesting
Yeah.
that they didn't say that, okay.
I haven't had any closings been disrupted because of that 3-day rule. I've not had any situations where any of the tweaks we do as credits, we don't change the back numbers, because anything that changes the back numbers can affect the APR. And if it affects your APR more than 8%, or say your client 3 days before closing says, oh, I don't want to do the conventional, I'm going FHA, that's a change of circumstance, which would push it out. So where the law, when the TRID came about, we thought, oh my gosh, any change is going to cause a problem. No. And that's why we're able to do that.
Is the title company liable for a penalty along with the lender for doing that? Yeah, wow. Okay.
Yeah, but really, it's the lender's scrutiny though. It's really the lenders that share the burden, which actually, I mean, most of it's on them because.
Well, it was the lender that was late getting it.
Yeah.
But then everything went through anyway, so they should have pushed it out.
They should have pushed it out, or they have some documentation that said that they received it. Because if they don't, then there's a
Well, they may that I don't know about, but I know, let's hope for the best.
Yes, but usually, I mean, and if you don't ask, I've asked and I've never had anyone say no.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that would be scary. I mean, I wouldn't know what to do. Sellers are gone usually by the time they get to the closing disclosure.
Right.
So that's a problem. Okay. The role of I'm Lisa.
Brad.
Hi, nice to meet you. So we're just going over this.
Okay.
This is just a cheat sheet for your TRID timelines, 3 days prior to closing. So it tells you when the closing date is and when the lender has to deliver
Okay.
electronically and then via mail. Okay. So the settlement statement, like I said, we use this. Alta's a lot less easy, I find. So every time you go to other title companies, you can have something that looks a little different, but Echo Title, you always get something that looks like this. So our role as a settlement company is that we communicate with both sides of the transaction. We're a collector of all things. So where your client sits down and does their loan application and they write the contract. Once the contract is written and ratified, then you send the information over to the title company, and the title company gets working on it. Things that we're responsible for is we order a title search on the property, we order a survey, we need to order payoffs for the sellers, and then we need to have all the information for the buyers so we know how they're taking title to the property. Echo Title does a 40-year search. Not all title companies do searches that are that long. Some title companies do 2 owner searches. The problem that we find with the companies that do 2 owner searches is that anything behind the second owner is not addressed. And we do find a lot of unreleased liens or trusts that were behind the second owner. So that's why we feel we should do a complete search, which is 40. We resolve title issues. 1 in every 3 transactions has a title issue. Most common that we see is HOA liens. We have common name liens. We have unreleased deed of trusts. Those are the common. And then we have the IRS liens and everything else, but the most that we see are those. And we can easily disqualify. So we call you up. A lot of times you're not going to know that we found title issues because we try to disqualify that or call the title company in the chain of title. Whoever transferred the property last to get their documentation to be able to clear it. If there's an issue, then we call you. But 9 times out of 10, we can go ahead and satisfy those before even getting to you. We don't like to alarm you. Okay, if you sat in the back of my office sometimes, you'd probably freak out about a lot of things that are happening. But at the end of the day, we're completely in control of the transaction. Our job is to protect you and your clients and to make sure you have insurable and marketable title. Okay, any questions about that? After the closing, we are also responsible for dispersing the loan fully and making sure everything gets recorded as it needs to be. We are a wet settlement act state, so what that means is that we have to have all monies, lender money, buyer's money at the table before we go to record. The only thing that is different from that is an assignment of funds, which means your seller is purchasing a property from the sale of his home, but he went to a different title company to do it, and they're assigning his proceeds from his sale to the purchase. So there's a delay in that, and the reason why there's a delay in that is because it has to go to record first. His sale has to record and disperse before that company can release the funds to us to fund his transaction, okay? In Northern Virginia, we use assignment of funds all the time. It's very easy. If your sellers have to acknowledge that your buyers are purchasing with an assignment of funds, that's part of the contract, okay? So if you know that you're doing a back-to-back, you need to notify the listing agent that you're purchasers are purchasing the property with an assignment of funds from the sale, okay? What is a good settlement? It means different things to different people. My goal is to have a smooth settlement. A smooth settlement to me is everybody coming in at the right time, no issues, open communication, all documents are explained in an easy, understandable way. You're never going to get pushed out of our settlement room without understanding what they're signing. We believe wholeheartedly in that. I just don't say point and just see where your name is and not explain the documents. I don't think that's fair to you or your clients. Because my goal is to make sure that that the settlement is done so that we preserve your referrals on the back end. So what that means is we make you look good. You've worked really hard. Everything's gotten smooth up into closing. God forbid anything happens in your settlement, that's the last thing that they remember. So our goal is to make sure that nothing goes wrong so that you have the referrals coming back afterwards, okay? Settlement killers, surprises. So increased closing costs that are not disclosed, walk-through issues that you walk in the door, you haven't called us yet, haven't talked to the listing agent, poor communication, unrealistic expectations. And what I mean by that is time frame from the time that you ratified the contract to the time that you go to settlement. Sometimes there's some unrealistic expectations as to how quickly or how long it will take to get the work done. So managing your client's expectations, if it's a short sale, for instance, you want to manage your client's expectations. You know when they sign that contract that it could be up to 120 days before settlement occurs. So, and then of course, they could be first-time home buyers, they don't understand, they're getting anxious, they have to move out of their apartment, oh my gosh, it's awful. But if you manage the expectations, they know up front, okay? So it's just, there's no bad news unless it's like the last minute and then people don't know how to deal with it. So always manage their expectations. Poor time management, ensuring that all your contingency timelines are met. Make sure that you're hitting those, and then just make sure that they're mapped out in the contract so you don't miss them. Okay, so we talked about that. Okay. So when you're submitting your contract to your title company, you want to go ahead and submit everything. That's all contract pieces, all addendums, all contingencies. If we are holding the deposit, please notify us that we're doing so, because we have to watch the timeline on that. We have 5 days to deposit that. We need to make sure we're staying within that, okay? Which we're happy to do. We also need a copy of the listing as of the contract date. So when you submit the contract, print out the listing and send it to us, okay? So split settlements are a big deal in our industry. Reason being is that each client wants to have their own representation. In the contract, you only have, the purchasers have a right to choose, and there's only one settlement agent. So if your seller is asking to go to Echo Title, for instance, they're asking for representation, which means we put it through our law firm. Okay, because as a title company, I can't represent you, but my law firm can. Okay? The reason why people do that is because purchasers have no-name title companies, people that are not familiar in the area to your agent, and your agent thinks it's in the best interest. You as an agent will think it's in the best interest of your client to go and have someone familiar to you to watch over the transaction. What I say to all my realtors is, hey, if you have an Echo Title, you have an RGS title, you have an MBH, you have a Champion, don't split them. They're good, reputable companies. They're very well known in the industry. You're going to be fine. But ABC title, maybe not so much. Okay, so that's the difference. There's only one settlement agent. The buyer's title company is the one that prepares the documents, and they prepare the final settlement statement. Okay, we prepare the deed. We make sure that we get everything, HOA information, we make sure that we get payoff information, everything that we would have to do on the seller side, we get to them, but ultimately they're the ones that are preparing the documents for closing. Buyers and sellers who are out of the area, we do this all the time. We send out their documents. We prefer to overnight the documents. Reason being is that if we email them, if they don't get printed out correctly, the type font might not record correctly. They might kick it back. Okay, so we prefer, if you have a seller that's out of town, please give us like a viable, not a PO box address that they're going to be at, so that we can talk to them and that they know what the expectations are of signing the documents and when they have to get them back. Same with purchasers. Now, clients are divorcing. We have one of these coming up, and not all divorces are amicable, you know, and there's proceeds to be shared. And a lot of times, which we have right now, is we have one side saying, well, he said he's going to give me all the proceeds, and then he said, well, I never agreed to that. So now we're going back and forth on the proceeds authorization. So we are only doing what we are instructed to do on both parties. Okay, if they ask us to split 50-50, we're going to do that. But if there's a discrepancy, we will hold it in escrow, or we'll ask for a property settlement agreement. Okay, because that tells us specifically how everything's supposed to be done. So if you have a divorced couple, you want to ask if they have a property settlement agreement. Bankruptcy, we run everyone through a bankruptcy search, so we know, and a lot of times sellers won't tell you that they're in bankruptcy. With bankruptcy, we have to go through the bankruptcy court, we have to get approval to sell the property. So a lot of times, if there's proceeds to be had, then we have to submit the proceeds to the bankruptcy court and not to the seller. So there's specific people that we have to deal with on those types of transactions, okay? Estate cases, we just need a copy of the will, copy of the death certificate. Is the will probated? If the person has been deceased less than a year, they're going to have to purchase an extra special hazard risk premium so that they can get the proceeds from the sale. So that means creditors have a year to come forward against the estate. So if it's less than a year, then we're going to ask for them to purchase the hazard risk premium, or we have to hold the funds in escrow until that year comes up. Okay. More times than not, people are fine with paying the extra hazard risk premium. Okay. If you have particularly difficult clients, let us know. Let us know that he's really mad at something, or he's just been really difficult, doesn't answer his phone, because then we're prepared for that. As well as a reader. If you have a reader, let us know. You'll know right away. Because he's not taking he's going to sit down, he's going to read, and he's going to highlight, and he's going to do whatever. Let us know, because what we try to do is get them the documents 48 hours ahead of time so that they can review it. Okay, I'm really good at letting people sit and read. I'm fine as long as I don't have another closing coming in, but because I do not want people to feel rushed. But at the end of the day, if they have 48 hours or even 24 hours to review the documents, they come in, they're relaxed, they might still have questions, but not nearly the amount that they would have if they were a reader. So let us know ahead of time. Okay. So picking a settlement date, this is pretty standard. Listen to your lender, ask them realistically what the timeline is. It's better to make a 40-day close than a 30-day close and be rushing around at the end of the minute, especially if they're doing VHDA. A lot of the grant money, there's a lot of things that are stopping. They're so inundated with things that we're not hitting settlement dates. So you just want to ask them, say realistically, when do you think we should close, and then they'll be able to tell you based on the criteria that they've already had with your purchaser. Last day of the month or the 15th of the month, just know that those are the busy days. Any Fridays that we're finding is a busy day, because clearly people want to move on the weekend. 4 o'clock closings. At the end of the month, I would stay away from them. Reason being is that everything from I call it the 3 o'clock hour, the witching hour. If something's going to happen, it's going to happen with that 3 o'clock settlement, and then it pushes everything back. If we're running late, I will step out and I will call you and say, hey, we're running late, can you show up a little, like 30 minutes late? I will not, if I can help it, have you come into the settlement room and sit there for an hour waiting for me to come out and do your closing. Okay, so we'll let you know. 9 o'clock closings, as long as we have closings, as long as we have the documents before, we could do a 9 o'clock closing, but we need those the day before. Okay, so let's talk title, which is the meat of why we're here, and it's this, it looks like this right here. Okay. The title report and the survey is required and will be ordered promptly. Okay, what we're having problems with now is we have a lot of people that are waiving house location surveys, and I'll get to why it's important that you don't tell them not. I mean, they're gonna save $300, but in the future, it could come back to bite them, so I'll explain why. This is the paragraph that says if not available on the settlement date, so if the title and the survey are not done on the settlement date, then the settlement must be delayed, may be delayed up to 10 days or until they can obtain the title report. And then it goes on to say, at the option of the seller may be terminated and the deposit refunded. So we know this, you know your contract. Problems. We're required to provide marketable insurable title. So what that means is that we're conveying the title, which is good and marketable and insured by a licensed title insurance company at no risk, with no additional risk premium. In case action is required to perfect the title, such action might be taken promptly. So the purchaser is not required to buy a house location survey. But if you don't buy a house location survey and there's easements or encroachments on the property that you don't know where the boundary lines are, then your owner's title insurance policy is going to take exception to those, or anything that's not recorded in the land records. Okay, so it could be a problem. It could be a problem. We had a gentleman that needed to do a boundary survey because those are really expensive, meets and bounds. He refused to do it. And then his neighbor, it found out that his neighbor's fence is like 20 feet on his property. He's got a building that's encroaching. And then he lined up other buildings with the building that was not on his property as well. That's gonna be huge. That's gonna be a huge issue. And so for $300 for your house location survey, or $1,500 if you don't know where your boundaries are or more, it's worth it because you're covered. You know what's happening. You know what's on your property. You know what you're taking title to, because those are big issues. Okay. Now, the lenders used to actually require them, and since the lender's title insurance policy does not take exception to that, they're covered for any survey issues, they don't require them anymore, and it's been a really long time since they've required them. So you'll have your loan officer sometimes, if they're tight on money, will say, you don't need that. If that's the case, maybe we can have a surveyor come out and put stakes on the lots, and that'll be a lot less cheap, it'll be cheaper than doing the house location, but at least they'll know where the boundaries are. Okay. We talked about surveys, kind of going really quickly here. Okay, so things that we normally see, normal things that we see on a house location surveys, your fence encroachments, structural encroachments, easements where they shouldn't be, actual size or acreage is inconsistent with the contract, and lack of legal access to the property. All of which, if you have a survey, you find out these things, and if you don't, then you don't. Okay, so always recommend that you have a survey. If they decide they don't want a survey, they'll sign what's called a survey waiver at closing. Okay, but most lenders, even on loan estimates, will provide an estimated amount for the survey. Okay, so it's already in their closing costs estimate. So they have to have, I would think they have to really have a legitimate reason other than saving money as to why they don't. If the seller has, if the seller has purchased the property within 10 years or to the date of closing, ask them if they have a copy of the survey. Because we can go ahead and recertify the survey. 10 years, we can go in and insure with that. Okay? So if they don't want one, then ask, just like you could ask the listing agent if their seller has an owner's title insurance policy if it's 10 years from newer. Because then they can get a reissue rate on the title insurance.
I got a question.
Mhm.
I had a contractor come to my house the other day. He told me, he was like, oh yeah, definitely check your your surveys every time because the county changes their boundaries all the time. And I said, really? I wasn't aware of that, but it's like it happens all the time. It's like,
Changes boundaries, or they add
yeah, so
easements,
if
or?
you, well, if you have, you know, your land is your land, you would think, they can't just come in and change that, I thought. But he was saying that, yeah, people think that, you know, they're on their property and they start, you know, I don't know. But
You
was
might have
just-
been talking about easements. And their easements are recorded in the property, and they're not always put on the surveys. But they're in the recorded, like if I review all raw title work and they're in there, just like.
But do easements change them? I mean, he's saying that these things change
I don't
and they don't let you know about it.
think that that's right.
Okay.
I don't know how
I
that.
didn't think so either.
I don't know, if they're gonna add, one of the questions to the seller is they have to sign a seller's affidavit at closing, and what they're attesting to is that there's no outstanding liens or judgments that are gonna be registered against the property. So we do a title search, and then within 30 days, we try to go to closing. Our title binder has the date on it, and then what we do before we record is we call the abstract, or we do what's called a title bringdown. And the title bringdown will show if a mechanic's lien or anything pops up, okay? They're also telling me that the county has not notified them of any new easements, any boundary disputes, anything that we don't know about, we ask at closing. So I've never heard of that.
Okay.
I would be shocked, I would be surprised.
Yeah, that was just,
I would be surprised. But again, I don't know.
it was contractor.
He's a contractor. So he can put a mechanic's lien against, I don't know, I really don't know, but I've never heard of that. So my day is one, I go in and I have a contract rack and I have a title review rack. And what I'm looking for with regards to the contract review is I look through the contract and then I look at a settlement statement. And sometimes we send you an estimated settlement statement, and all it is the terms of the contract. So we have your commissions. I know that most RE/MAX offices have an admin fee or a flat rate commission fee that we just kind of automatically populate certain things. We do all the transfer taxes based on the loan amount, based on anything that we get, and we send it out to you, okay? With title review, I actually sit down and I look through the chain of title to make sure that everything's intact. If there's anything that I need that worries me a little bit, then I mark it on my sheet and wait for the title binder. You will get from me, once I review that title, you will get actually an email from me that says everything that I found in the title work. If everything's clear, if the settlement, if the seller has one or two mortgages against the property, if taxes have been paid, that we're gonna order a survey. If you don't want a survey, this is the time of closing. So you're gonna get that little title exam process you're looking for, what I'm talking about.
There
Okay. You're gonna get a synopsis from me. If there's an issue, a title issue that I feel like that I need to tell you about, it will be in that paragraph, and then you're free to contact me. A lot of times, like I said, we're able to disqualify based on the information that we have in title. So how your client takes title to the property is really important, okay? We're able to disqualify based on that. A lot of times, title searches uncover liens and judgments against people that have common names. Okay, and we do a lot of digging, we get last four digits of social. We go back to the title company and find out what documentation that they have. Okay. The title commitment is a promise to provide insurance to the lender and the purchaser. 10 days prior to closing, your lender will receive their title commitment. They'll receive an estimated settlement statement. They'll receive a copy of the survey and the termite, and the insured closing letter. That is the documentation that they need, the lender, to move forward with closing from us. So if they're asking for it, they say, well, I don't have the title work back, or I don't have the title binder, that's what they're asking. And then they say, then that's when you would call and say, hey Lisa, they're saying you don't have the title work or the title binder. And I can go in and find out when you settle it. If you change your settlement date, if you're moving it up, let us know, because I also have to change that in the computer. Okay, oftentimes that's the last thing. Okay. Title insurance basics. Title insurance is a contract between my underwriter and indemnifies the purchaser for any loss or damage resulting in a defect, lien, or encumbrance on the title of the insured property. So title insurance covers past events. So from the time that your purchaser is purchasing the property to all the way back till it started to transfer. Lender's title insurance is required. Lenders will not allow you to waive that at all. And that protects the lender's interest in the property because they are securing the interest until the loan's paid off. And as that loan gets paid, it starts to depreciate. Owner's title insurance is optional. You will always, in any settlement, whether it's with me or someone else, they need to be telling your client that at the table, okay? It's optional. We never, ever, ever, ever would tell people not to get title insurance because it protects their ownership interest. They're entering into a chain of title, they purchase it one time, and they never have to buy it again, and it protects them even if they don't own the property anymore, okay? There's two types of policies, standard and advantage, which we call enhanced. Actually, I meant to include that, and I'll send you, if I can get your cards, I'll go ahead and send you copies of the differences between the two. There's a 25% difference in the policies. Main thing that advanced covers that standard doesn't is identity theft, okay, permit issues, boundary disputes. Those are the main differences between the two. We always quote the higher rate. Okay, if you know your client's tight on money and you want to see a settlement statement with enhanced and then show me what standard is, and then I'll send you out the difference between the two policies so that you're educated enough to either talk to them or have your client call me. But at least you can have a cost breakdown of what it costs for the difference and what is included in one and not the other. Okay, any questions? Then standard and enhanced. Okay, so under the title paragraph, it also says the title has to be marketable and insurable by a licensed title agent. We underwrite through Commonwealth and Fidelity. In case action is required to perfect title, such action must be taken promptly by the seller at the seller's expense. So if we have a situation where there's no insurance, there's no record, there's no way that we're going to be able to clear title, then at the seller's expense, they may have to hire an attorney to quiet title if they don't have title insurance. We had a situation, and this was a year ago, where we were the settlement agent, and another title company was representing a seller. He had purchased the property in like 1992. His wife died in 1994, and he paid off the loan. Well, there's no record of him paying off the loan. The loan was still a matter of title, matter of public record. And when we went back to the title company is no longer in business, and the lender was no longer in business, and we couldn't track who the lender was or who took over the records for that to show that it was paid in full. So we had to wait 3 months, and he had to hire an attorney, more than $8,000 to quiet title. And he couldn't find his title insurance, nothing. So that's why, if nothing more, it's really important that, I mean, it happens. You have foreclosures. We're just coming out of that market. You have REOs. You have a lot of things that have just happened in the last 10 years that would protect your, the title insurance would protect your purchasers from things behind the foreclosure that wasn't done correctly. So, and they will sign a waiver at closing, okay? Any questions? So if they don't want it, they'll sign a waiver. But don't be the one telling them not to get it, okay? Because you don't want them to come back and say, well, my agent told me. That's awful. So like we said before, the 1 in 3 files have problems. We have unreleased deeds of trust, judgments, deed restrictions, outstanding ownership interests, fraud, foreclosure discrepancies, and short sale mishaps. Okay? We have a client that is buying an REO. Her title company from Pennsylvania works for the REO company, said they're going to pay owner's title insurance. So that's about $1,500. They quoted the standard policy. And what, interesting enough, is that title policy, what they do is they only go as far as they do title bring down on just to the end of the foreclosure, nothing behind it. Okay? So fast forward 5 years, they go to sell the property, and we find, judgments, prior owner judgments, and they didn't buy insurance, or they didn't have a reputable title company looking after them. Okay, so there's a trade-off. I mean, I waived my settlement fee, and he's getting enhanced coverage, but I told them if they want to go with the Pennsylvania title company, then ask for the raw title work and let me look at it. Okay?
Question, so
Yeah.
is the title insurance part of the closing cost then? So if you're asking for seller subsidy, then it would cover it?
A lot
If-
of
I
times,
mean, if- I
a
mean,
lot of
if it
times the
was-
seller subsidy covers most of the title,
Okay.
most of those.
Okay, so it would be part of that though?
Mhm.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you're calculating that, you wanna think about that. And then I had someone say, well, I don't want title insurance, and I said, well, if you don't utilize, sometimes you don't have enough closing costs, so you're adding in HOA for a year, you're adding
Yeah.
in a warranty, well, it's already paid for. So if you waive, say, the $1,200 owner's title insurance policy, then you're actually giving a seller back money it's already paid for in your closing costs, so you're right. So, something to look for. I don't have any really big title issues other than that one so far this year. Okay, so we just talked about waiving title insurance. If your client is telling you they want to waive title insurance, have them call me, or have them call the title company that you're working with. Let the title agent, because we're licensed to sell title insurance, so we understand it. We understand what it's gonna protect. Let us do our job. I'll explain to them what it is. I'll explain to them what they're waiving. Like I said, I'll send them information, and if they still, most of the times they come back and they say, okay, we'll get this standard policy. They're fine with standard, they don't really think they need the enhanced, that's fine. I would feel really bad if we didn't educate them, and they walked out of there and then there was a title issue. Okay. I did have a situation 2 weeks ago where these clients waived title insurance, and I said, do you understand it? They said yes. And then once the sellers left, I said, well, can you tell me who explained this to you? Well, in New York, they had an issue with and the title insurance didn't protect them for permit issues, and it ended up costing like $1,300 to fix something that they thought title insurance should have covered, so they decided that they weren't gonna get it. I understand that. They had a bad experience. But I asked them to send it to me, but there's things things that happen that you think title insurance should cover that it doesn't, so just let them ask the questions of us, and then we're able to educate them, and then they can make their decision. Okay? Okay, so when can I get the final closing disclosure or settlement statement? You have to have your client's permission to get the closing disclosure from the lender. I think